As certified life coaches with 45 years combined experience in human resources, Jen Trumm and Katherine have both experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, both personally and professionally. What they both know to be true is this: our mental, physical, and emotional health are the essential building blocks in order to thrive and shine in the field of HR. In a first of its kind podcast, we'll be getting real and we'll discuss and share what has contributed to both our success and struggles, with the goal of inspiring women around the globe to stand tall and take the necessary action to both thrive and shine in HR. Here are your hosts, Jen and Katherine.
Hello, everyone. This has been an episode of First. We have had some technical issues coming on here, and now we are on and we're live, and so happy to be here for episode number 30. Wow. The episode title for today is Stop Putting Out Fires: How to Shift Out of Reactive HR and into Responsive HR. I cannot flip and wait to get into the subject. But first, I am so excited, Kathy, to hear all about your vacation. When we left last week, you were just about to take off for vacation, or just starting your vacation. And now you're just getting back, aren't you?
Yes, I called in. I did the podcast from Sun Valley. Yeah. So that was our second day of vacation. We had been driving for 2 days. So we had finally arrived in Sun Valley. Vacation was wonderful. And we literally pulled into the house at 5:20 p.m. today, and it is now 5:46. So I literally hopped out of the car, ran up to my office, haven't been here in a while, and I'm so ready to go for this episode today. I am so excited. As I was sitting in the passenger seat getting ready for the episode on the final stretch home, when we finally had connectivity, I got more and more excited to talk about this one today. But yeah, vacation was great, Jen. I had a great time. It was many of our listeners know that I have been doing a lot of travel. I've been working away from home and away from my partner for the majority of the summer, as in 3 out of 4 weeks of every month. So to spend a week with him, just with him in the middle of the Wyoming and Idaho backcountry, it's our happy place. And it was just it fostered some deepening of connection that we have, which is really, really great. So feels good to be back. Feel refreshed and ready to go. Absolutely ready to dive in. How about you? How was your week?
It's been a bit bumpy. So this has been not quite a vacation week for me, but I had mine already, right? I can't keep taking vacations. So yeah, life be life in the last couple of weeks. School started, in the last couple of weeks. We had open house on Monday. Work has just been a roller coaster of all kinds of things going on. We did have a fun barbecue today, so that was awesome. Really special to be able to bring so many of the employees came out and, in their break and lunch and come and have a burger or hot dog. And yeah, it was really cool. Had some cornhole going. And I feel like those are the moments, for me.
Yes.
I just, there's something really special about like that coming together. And so we try to do that as much as we possibly can where I work, just because that's, I think, where you truly can build kind of those culture moments. So so today's been a good day, but overall I'm like, I've been on a ride.
You're like, girl, I'm ready to get off, but we'll maybe save that conversation for another time.
Oh, well, let's get into the topic. So this week's topic again is about stop putting out fires and how to turn away from reactive HR into responsive HR. And I am just really excited to dig into this. And so let's go into the first question. What are the main differences that you've seen between reactive HR and responsive HR? And why do you think so many of us get stuck in the reactive mode?
I mean, this is deep right off the bat, right? For me, just to simplify things, I think reactive HR is just when we feel no sense of autonomy, no sense of control, no sense of agency whatsoever. In other words, we can't plan for anything. We can't get out ahead of everything. We feel like we are just under fire constantly. And there are so many different fires to put out that we are just doing our best with our back up against a wall and literally quite on our heels. And it's just this very graspy type of HR, whereas the flip side of it is that responsible HR, right? That empowered HR, our ability to respond. I mean, that's really what responsibility means when you parse out the word. It's our ability to respond. So it is showing up to work differently because the pinging and the fires, that's just a part of work life. It is. Whether we're in HR, whether we transition to finance, no matter what it is a part of work life. Currently, the way, especially in America, the way that we show up. And for me, being responsible comes from empowered thinking, empowered action, being able to be strategic, using our prefrontal cortex, understanding the human brain. So for me, that's really the main differences between reactive, more of a deficit-based approach to HR versus that responsive, more of that empowered approach to HR. And I think the true reason why people get stuck in this reactive mode is that we have not been taught the skills that are essential for HR leaders to operate in more of a responsive HR realm. And I'll dive into that throughout. But to me, it's no fault of anyone's. We've inherited these archaic management approaches, leadership approaches in HR, and they don't work. And that leaves us swirling because we cannot get out of it. But Jen, what you and I know, and we talk about a lot, is that there are skills that we can work on and develop to shift into responsive HR.
Yeah.
That's just my opener. I mean, what are your thoughts with that very first question? Like, why do you think we get so stuck? And what do you see as the differences? Because we have a very different definition.
Yeah. I mean, oh my gosh, that was incredible. That was the best definition I could have ever thought, and so spot on. And I would say I don't need to like redefine that. You defined it so perfectly that I would just say that I think, for me, one of the things that I have noticed so much is like, when it comes to how we show up in our day-to-day life, you had hit on it in terms of what we're really aware of and what we're just trying to kind of get through, right? There's not really like that pause and reflect. I don't got no time for that, right? So it's just constantly happening. And really, I think what you and I will talk about is like how to kind of stop that, how to slow that down.
Yes.
And because it's so natural, and without the tools, without the skills, without the understanding, we just don't know any better. And,
totally.
And so I think, in terms of reactive versus responsive, what I put is like, I think, for me, being reactive is just, there's something that I'm triggered from a situation, either positively or negatively, right? Reacting could also be like, that's so amazing, like reacting really positively, where now I am so, so like laser focused on what I perceive as being good. I'm done, right? That's it. And you're not then open sometimes to those possibilities. So I think on both sides, reactivity is really an imbalance of neutrality. Oof. That would be my definition of it. And responsiveness is neutrality, right? It's an equilibrium. And I'm like gut checking myself. And I think that's, where we'll get to is like the gut checking yourself before you really enter into, something that could potentially go triggering, or even after it does, and recognizing, am I a little topsy-turvy right now? Because that's, where it kind of comes in, either positive or negative, again, because whether or not that balance is up or down, if there's an imbalance, then we are not necessarily looking at it from a truly neutral perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what's coming up for me as you're saying that is it's almost like this toxic positivity, this gut check response of, oh my God, that's so great, when maybe that isn't the exact right response to have in the moment to the situation. So I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's more of this equilibrium.
Yeah.
I love that.
And it's not good or bad necessarily at all. It's really about, like, trying to work towards, if we really wanted to work towards, non-reactivity, it's recognizing it's showing up in us constantly. And so how do we just start to kind of take those steps back and say, hey, am I like aware of how my emotional reaction might be influencing me in this moment? And that's really kind of where we're headed in this conversation. So let's get into the next question.
Without having talked about this before the recording, I love where we're already jointly heading.
Always. Can you share a personal experience where you found yourself putting out fires in HR? And what did that teach you about being more proactive?
For me, so I'm 49, up until I was 45 years old, and I started in HR at 21. So let's do some quick math. 24 years. I felt like everything was a fire. And here's what I mean by that. If open enrollment was happening and suddenly I needed to post a job, or someone came into my office and said, do you have 5 seconds? Or there was already a workplace investigation going on and the lawyer called with a quote unquote quick question. I mean, I always felt on my heels, always, for 24 years. And that's really why, Jen, when you asked me, hey, would you ever want to do a podcast? I was like, yes, because I just know there are other HR professionals out there just like me for those 24 years who just felt like you had to get to everything all at once. And we sort of have a tendency to look at everything as a fire, and we've got to put it out now. And what I've learned throughout, the last 5 years has really been about not everything's an emergency. And truly, and it's about prioritization. It's understanding that we can't do everything. And especially women, we tend to be socialized this way. We think we need to be that nice HR person who shows up in this very calm manner 100% of the time, this perfectionist mentality, this people-pleasing mentality. And I think, for me, I can only speak for me and speak to all the research that I've done, that reactive HR is truly a frame of mind. 100%. It's how we're showing up in a certain mode to the things that are happening. If you look at it to you or for you, that's a big thought upgrade right there. So honestly, Jen, I mean, I could tell you about 1.5 million examples. I remember sitting in board meetings as my emails are just pinging, like people from various offices throughout the world needed to get a hold of me. And I was in a 2-day all-in board retreat, and I'm getting these pings. And meanwhile, after the board retreat, everybody would go out drinking. It was a very heavy drinking culture. And I would go out and drink, and then I would be answering emails until 3 a.m. and get up at 7 a.m. to do it all over again. So just some very, very unhealthy habits, because I always felt like, even if I was at a conference, I was never fully focused on the conference. My email was pinging, my IM at the time was pinging. And I just felt like I had to be everything to everyone all at the same time. So yes, there's always going to be things happening in HR, but I think it's how we show up that determines if we're in a reactive mode or a responsive mode. Yeah. I gave 2 little examples in there, but I just want anyone who can relate to how I showed up for 24 years, you're not alone and you've done nothing wrong. You just don't quite know how to take advantage of your prefrontal cortex quite yet. Truly that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I have, so much, I think, credit, for, those of us as, we're really trying to kind of figure this out, and really recognizing that, we haven't there's nothing that we've done wrong, as we're trying to kind of really come to, a better awareness of this stuff. And for me too, I can remember so many times, when I was working at I worked for several hotels. It was a hotel group, and it was all within the Southern Oregon. I think I've talked about it before. And that, I think I probably even talked about it in episode 7 about busyness, but it was really, I was constantly going. But what I thought about with this particular episode was around the addiction, I think, that we have to the busyness, because of like, that you nailed it, the service to everybody, the people pleasing to everybody. I am going to be my best self when I am pleased everybody, right? And so we're bringing up this narrative, we're building up this narrative in our mind around, in order to be the best of them, right? In order to be the best of the best, I need to make sure that I have exceeded everybody's expectations, except, right? Typically, except for our own, right? At the end of the day, and also sometimes for those we love the most. And that's really, I think, the reality. And it kind of goes in, deeper. But for me, as I was really thinking about that, when reactivity really led me almost into this obsessive game of really being hungry for it, and almost having kind of an addiction around it. If I have to kind of meet all these obligations, I have to get it all done in order to kind of be that good girl, or that person who is really making their mark. And here's the truth of it, right? The impact to it. And so it's really just been in the last couple of years, kind of looping this around, where I've really kind of come to terms with that and recognize that's the why. The why is really, I think, just this need to want to do it all. And yeah, so where's I going with that? I think it's just a matter of really kind of seeing that in a different way.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I love where you went with that. Because I'm just going to follow suit with the next question.
All right, number 3. Why do you think reactive HR has become the norm in many organizations?
I mean, I'm gonna keep going with the momentum you've built.
Yeah.
And because I literally wrote down, and this may ruffle some feathers. And I think if it ruffles feathers, it's probably true for you. I find that when my feathers are ruffled, it's like, oh, there's some truth in that about me, right? And that's okay. Yeah. It's about ownership. It's about personal accountability. And I do feel, when, you were talking about the busy badge, right? Just taking pride in that busyness, and maybe not even having awareness about that pride or that addiction.
Totally.
Yeah. And I think the driving force beneath that is that we want to matter in this lifetime.
Yes.
We just want to matter. We want to leave our mark. Yeah. And in this profession, we have so many opportunities to do that. And we put the pressure on ourselves to be everything to everyone all at once. And what we end up doing is spreading ourselves really, really thin, and showing up in a way, showing up like we're putting out fires, like it's an emergency, but we're not a trained firefighter. I'm literally envisioning, I mean, we drove through so much wildfire devastation on our road trip.
Wow.
There are wildfires all over Idaho and Wyoming, and the smoke is just so thick. And I think about the fire, we went by fire camps, which was, I mean, talk about hats going off to those who provide that service and put their life at risk to put out forest fires. But I think about literally putting out a fire, and how calm you have to be, and how strategic you have to be. And if I think about myself in HR, I was the exact opposite. I was almost like fanning the flame, almost thinking I was putting it out. But because I wasn't being slow and methodical and taking things one at a time and really understanding that, like the approach that our wildfire fighters take. I didn't understand that. I really thought I was doing a good job by giving a little bit of myself to everything.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, when in reality, it's like I'm almost stirring up the coals and reigniting more fires than putting out one at a time. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I really do think that we're not doing anything wrong. It's just the root cause is we're trying to have an impact in this lifetime on other people, because that's what makes us feel good in HR. I've never met an HR professional who has said, they went into HR other than anything but to help people.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just can't see that we're actually being unhelpful when we're in that reactive mode. And most time that reactive mode is self-induced. I rarely work with clients who say, my boss is asking me to do more by yesterday and the whip is out. I rarely run into those situations with my clients. It's my client's own personal expectations. It's that addiction to whatever, because it is individual. One person's addiction may be for a certain reason, another person's is another, but it is that addiction and just wanting to crush it. It's wild.
Wow.
Why do you, I don't even know if I answered the question.
You did. Why do you think reactive HR has become the norm? Really, we're talking about why is it so prevalent in each of us? If you really want to get down to it, and that was really probably the better question to ask. As soon as you were answering it in that way, I'm like, that would have been a better way to ask it. Because
see, that's
so
yourself.
I think you nailed it. Unless you can think of anything else about why you. What's that?
Oh, I was saying, don't
what?
like you're beating yourself up about not asking the right question. I'm like, don't do that to yourself, Jen. No way. It was a great question.
Oh my gosh. Like, I'll start saying I'm sorry and we'll get back to our confidence episode. Don't say you're sorry.
And I'll say it right back. Don't worry.
Are you crazy? Oh, okay. Well, then I'll take it unless you had anything that you could think of from an organization.
I want to hear what you have to say. Something tells me I'll have a follow-up as usual.
Oh my goodness. So I came up with, you had said earlier when you opened this up, it was like practically mic drop. We're out of here, girl. Let's go. Because it's been perpetuated for many, 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 many years. The norms, the behaviors, the attitudes within the organizations that perpetuates the behavior of reactivity. It's not HR's fault. It's not anybody's fault, really. It's just, this is what's been perpetuated in our organizations for as long as there have been organizations. This is how human beings are to one another. And without the education, without the understanding, you don't know what you don't know. So that's like a phrase that I say a lot at work, because anytime it's so interesting, like, how when I kind of caught, I'm like, oh, I'm asked the wrong question. And there's like this immediate, like internal sense of I did wrong or something. Oof. I see that so often with like leaders, especially when there's something that all of a sudden then they become aware of, that they could have handled the situation better or differently because they maybe overreacted. And then their first instinct always is immediately to go to self-blame, all of these, I'm terrible, whatever, right? They start kind of going down this rabbit hole. So what you did, and I think what I try to do is really just say, I totally understand. I totally understand that would be upsetting, that, you're recognizing that this is not the behavior that you want to have, but you only know what you know until you know different. And then when you know different, today is a great day to start. So, that's, I think, within organizations, because it's been perpetuated for thousands, so long, we got to just start making it normalized to be able to say, good for you, high five, right? Rather than, and a lot of times what ends up happening in the board meetings and other executive meetings is, and we'll kind of just turn away from it, right? Or we'll say, no, Nancy, and we'll almost like not shame back. It's not intentional, but it's kind of like this back and forth of like, everyone's now uncomfortable. So let's just stop the discomfort and let's just move on. And it almost feels like one of the roles that we can have in HR, and this is the next one, but where it becomes normal is really, I think, because where it could become normalized is just being able to be more open. And so that's when, I'll kind of get into that in the next question. But I think, again, it's, just, it is what it is. Right. It just is what it is. And that's okay. And let's stop judging it for being anything other. And then let's move from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And it's so funny you bring that up, because the antidote to self-judgment and judging others, it's that skill of curiosity. And I talk about that skill all the time in HR Empower. I talk about it with my one-on-one clients all the time. And in fact, it's one of the very first things I'll be bringing up in the mediation that I'm doing tonight. I absolutely, when I do mediations, I always start with a list of guiding principles. And fortunately, I had a code of conduct to pull from, which is always great. And my add, this is never in a code of conduct. It's never listed in a job description. It still blows my mind.
I can't wait.
That skill of curiosity. That's
the skill of curiosity.
That's
okay.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we, not to totally side rail and go off into this mediation, but when I bring up, okay, what needs to change? What's not working? How can you frame the question in a very curious way versus judgment? Mm-hmm. How can you sit in that curiosity of yourself and the other person as you're asking this question? So it's a very powerful thing that I think can really, really quite instantaneously get us out of reactive HR and into responsive HR. Just that shift when noticing, again, not blaming ourselves for the judgment, brain's hardwired for it, but understanding, just becoming more curious and practicing that curiosity, because it definitely doesn't happen overnight. It's a practice, just like any skill. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The curiosity without judgment, boy, is that hard. And that's a daily practice.
Daily practice. It has to be.
It can't get better until you knuckle down. Okay, question number 4. What does look at this. What does communication play in making the shift from reactive to responsive HR? It's like, how do we do this?
How do we do this? I have no idea. I mean, for me, when I read this question, I immediately thought, well, this is going to be an atypical answer. I don't think the audience is going to be expecting what I'm about to say, but maybe. I think we've teed this up. I think the role that communication plays, the most important role when it comes to shifting is our self-talk, is what we are telling ourselves. And one of my biggest lessons that I learned in coaching school was that our thoughts inform our feelings inform our behaviors, and our behaviors inform our responses. So it's quite literally why I teach a workshop on thought intelligence as the precursor to emotional intelligence, meaning our self-talk, the thoughts we are choosing really matter. And we can choose thoughts that are much more aligned with responsive HR versus reactive HR. And it may sound a little hokey, but by God, this has changed my life. It has truly transformed me out of reactive HR. And I just want this so deeply for every HR practitioner who is out there swirling in reactive HR right now. It starts with shifting our thoughts, quite literally. And it takes practice. And it takes a lot of self-curiosity. But for me, the role that communication plays is really that self-talk, our self-communication, if you will. Yeah. What did you think? What were your initial thoughts?
That was so good. You are so freaking out. You need to go on vacation more often, girl.
I do. I'm going to North Carolina at the end of October. So,
my goodness. You are so on fire tonight. This is great stuff.
I want to hear about you. I know your fuego's right there. Let's go. I want to hear it.
So yeah, you nailed it around the self-talk. And then
Mm,
to take it a step further is to really take that time that so many of us don't want to do to pay attention to what we're really saying. And whether it's through journaling or whatever, I think one of the things that I've noticed in working with clients is, there's a real reluctancy once we kind of catch ourselves in it. We're like, okay, I caught it. I'm done. I want to move on and I want to get back to action so I can kind of get past and not have that anymore, right? We don't want to
yes.
continue to feel that emotion. And one of the things that can be really difficult is really staying with it for a little bit. And so
Ooh.
that's really that what I would offer is sometimes is the sitting with it for a little bit, to actually kind of journal out, to write not only just the thought that came up, if you're kind of catching what it is that you're struggling with, that self-doubt or that imposter syndrome or whatever, but then really taking the time and saying, what's coming up for me that's causing that to be a thought that tends to perpetuate, that tends to come up, often for me. Those are the hard sit downs, right? Like, I don't know about you, but they don't happen often enough, really, if I'm being honest. But when they do, that's when we have the greatest opportunity for breakthroughs and really just being able to kind of crack it open, because it feels easier. And, like I just want to move on. And so that's kind of where it becomes tricky, is like, I get that totally. And if you sit with it a little bit and really recognize some of the doubts and some of the, what really might be underneath it, you can help then become more aware of like how that's coming up, for you. And so that's when it really gets into, how we become more body aware, and really starting to
Mm.
recognize these thoughts that we continue to have, and having more greater awareness. You can start to see how it then creates, whatever it does in our body, right? The fast heartbeat, sweaty palms, just really starting to pay attention to that body awareness, because that's exactly then where the thoughts and emotions, that's where it's going to go. It's not just about thinking about what I'm feeling. It's feeling what we're feeling. And that then is what then is creating the multitudes of ways that we're reacting without really being able to slow ourselves down. So it's
Mm.
really truly kind of the quote unquote work, but it's where you can finally start to kind of shift the needle. And so, I so loved what you said, because it set me up so perfectly to be able to say yes, and right.
Yes.
Yes,
And
and be
exactly.
willing to kind of go just one step further and allow yourself to really pay attention to the thoughts, and really allow yourself to pay attention to the body sensations. Now you're going to start being able to recognize it's completely okay, right? And that's kind of that reluctance of getting to the point where I don't want to be in this anymore. So how do we kind of help people move through that? And one of the things that came up for me recently is there was a gal who was doing a book tour locally where we're at in Oregon, and she came through and she teaches about conscious leadership. And I
Ooh,
think I shared my boss here at the end of this month is going to DC to go to a conscious leadership conference. And I was supposed to go, and
amazing.
I'm so bummed about it. But
Sign
that
me
to
up.
me is so what I feel like, I want to really help, with my leaders to be able to recognize, because you get us past then some of that reluctance and resistance around, just really kind of recognizing what might be under the surface. And now you start to really help these leaders be able to kind of shift their own knobs in different ways. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like, can we just be in the pocket of your boss? Like, you're in the left pocket, I'm in the right pocket, and we sneak in the conference? Can we like
Wouldn't that be
somehow
amazing?
go?
I know. I wanted to go so bad. And
Oh,
so yeah, it's like yeah, it's just really helping be able to get our leaders to a place where they can just serve from that responsive place. And again, it's about like recognizing all the turbulence, all that noise that we have that's going on around us is really something that we can practice. There are skills. And that's, what I'm so grateful for within my own role, and what I'm so grateful for with this podcast is this is the service we're providing as well.
Yeah.
So if I don't say it enough, Kathy, thank you so much. Such an honor to be on, an opportunity to educate and serve in the way that we do.
I couldn't agree more. I'll never regret saying yes to your ask ever.
All right. Well, let's get into the next question.
Okay.
What steps can HR professionals take to start shifting from a reactive mindset to a more responsive approach?
I would say identifying your top essential leadership skill, ESL, that's what I call them, that you personally need to work on. So that skill could be the skill of curiosity. It could be the skill of confidence, could be the skill of active listening. The list goes on and on. Empathy, humility, etc. Those quote unquote softer skills that never make it into a job description that are the foundation for essential HR leadership skills, truly. And I would say pause, get really honest with yourself, maybe even ask some other people that you love and trust who are going to give you that honest and loving and compassionate feedback to say, what's the one skill that I actually need to proactively work on that's related to showing up in a responsive way? And actually start to practice that skill. And if you're like, what are you even talking about? This is quite literally what I lead a course called HR Empower Hour every single Tuesday, like clockwork, at 2:00 Eastern time. And we practice the skills because nobody, as far as I know, nobody is leading a weekly workshop every single week just for HR professionals where you understand one another. It's already just this instantaneous tight-knit community because we all understand one another and we suddenly realize we're not alone. We have very similar struggles, but the difference is that HR Empower Hour isn't about staying in reactive HR mode. It's literally working on the skills week after week in a very short amount of time, and then practicing them in between sessions in a very short amount of time so that we up level week after week in a very doable approach. So if you're like, not really into courses, then have somebody else really help you identify the skill that you personally need to work on and start doing the work. Because what lies on the other side of the work is responsible HR. And it's this whole new, going back to the feeling in our body, Jen, what you were saying, I've never been more calm. I've never been happier in HR than I am now that I understand the skills that I personally needed to work on. Curiosity is a big one, if you can't tell. My number one skill, I'm always working on. What about you, Jen? When you think about literal steps that people in HR can take to make the shift, what would you say are those steps?
Yeah, again, you couldn't have nailed it better, because it has to start with awareness, and for you to, say, hey, you need to, kind of do that self-inventory is really what I wrote down around,
Love it.
Really having that honest dialogue with yourself, but also asking, right? Like, they say, ask your 5 closest colleagues or mentors or, those people, and really be open to their responses, right? These are people that, deep down want to see you thrive. Talk to those people and start to kind of build up for yourself, because I think, like if I'm putting myself in everyone else's shoes, it's scary when we're, in a position where where we really recognize we need to change something kind of significant about ourselves, or there's work to be done. And, there's some humility that sometimes can take some time to really kind of get to a place where it's like, I'm ready. And that's the thing I've noticed so often with people who I work with who, are thinking that they want to do coaching, that really love to see, they'll say, oh, I love, how you just seem so positive and so self-aware. And, you'll get all these compliments. And then when it comes down to it, you talk about like, what needs to happen. And they're like, I don't know. I don't know if I can do that. And that's, you got to commit. And that to me, I think even before you get to the inventory, before you start putting that time, you see this is kind of the diets, so many things that we'll kind of go into a little bit, but then we'll pull back for whatever reason, for, fear or whatever, right? But you got to commit to your growth. You got to double down on your growth, and you got to recognize the why behind it. And I think once I really solidified the why of my growth, and this was like, luckily pretty early in my career. Like I first got into HR and I was trained by like old school HR people who just were punching a clock and who were just bitching about as much as they could possibly bitch
Oh
at.
my
And they
God.
came to like training and conferences and all of that. They're like, we don't want to do that. We got so much to do. And look, you know what? I understand, right? We've talked about earlier, the perpetuation of the greater like business and organizational world. So it's not our faults that we've kind of then been delivered that as like those were our trainers and those were our mentors originally. But it really took time for me to kind of shake that off and be able to say, no, what is it what's really calling to me? I do want to serve. I do want to make a difference. Well, if that's true, if that's really true, then what is it going to take? It's going to take, you nailed it again, curiosity, right? It's going to take a real awareness around what are the deficiencies that I have that could really help others and help in the way that I most want to serve. So it's like, you just have to be willing to go there, but it's not going to come without the willingness to make that change. So if we're halfway in and halfway out and halfway in, it's just not going to stick. We gotta find that within ourselves, but it's also, I'll kind of back that up too, because there are times where like over the summer I'll go through chapters sometimes where like, I need to press a pause on growth right now. Okay. Like, and that's okay. And, we also need to like allow for that and find the space for that. But to also say in the last 20 years for me, I would say easily growth has been a priority. And as much as I can infuse that and foster that and really kind of help others in really recognizing why, that's going to give you so much more fulfilling, days and a lifetime of, whether it's an HR or whatever we do. Part of it includes our own growth. That's how we serve, that's how we can serve in the best possible way. So I think, kind of going back, it's like these two parts is like, how do we kind of help others find that, why it even matters, right? That when you and I came into the field was like out to lunch, and then, and then kind of take it to the next level and then identifying where do I go from here? And that can feel so overwhelming and it can feel like so much. And so helping, and I think that's so what you do so incredibly well with HR Empower Hour and all your coaching is like, I am here to help you with that. You're not alone. Right? You are not alone. You come and we help together. And that's one of the greatest gifts of all is when I'm actually being of service to you because I'm helping to you maybe see what you may not have caught. So all of it, I think, can be connected once there is that true willingness that, yes, this matters. And yes, I really understand why, because it's in service of my purpose. So, yeah.
Boy, yeah, there's nothing for me to add to that. You speak so eloquently as always. And for me personally, when I hired my first coach, it was because I hit rock bottom. I was so, I mean, I was swirling down the rabbit hole, and I don't think I could go any further. I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. I was not well mentally. I was not okay. And I didn't know, I just thought the solution was work harder, figure it out, keep going. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Just keep digging, keep digging. This is just how it is. This is just, it's how it is. And for me, it kept me so stuck in reactive HR. And I was so far down that I couldn't even see it.
Yeah.
Couldn't even see it.
Yeah.
So, for me, it took honestly kind of a health issue for me to say, that's enough. You're unhappy. I was unhappy. I mean, not all the time, but I would say I was tipping the scales towards unhappiness more than having the balance you started our podcast off with. I was nowhere near neutral. I was like unhappy most of the time. And I was anxious most of the time, to the point where I got a diagnosis and then put on drugs to overcome that anxiety. And that alone was a very reactive approach. And I needed it, and it worked short term. But what helped me long term and really get over truly my anxiety diagnosis was understanding the power of my brain. Yeah. Truly understanding that. And I'm not some like neuroscientist in training. When I found what worked for me, I just wanted to dig in more. I wanted to learn more. And it wasn't, kind of going back to what you were sharing, beating ourselves up isn't going to do any good. And we know that. And we catch ourselves beating ourselves up. That is just our first indication. That's the awareness piece. And if you want to stop beating yourself up, that's the willingness to do something about it, right? And it's just catching those thoughts of, I don't have time. I am too busy. I mean, those are truly thoughts. That's all that is. That's a reactive thought versus, I'm so busy and I know I can stop being so busy. What do I need to do differently to stop being so busy? It's almost like you have to finish the sentence, right?
Yes.
But I can only speak for myself that I was so far down that I couldn't even see straight, if I'm being super honest. Couldn't see it, didn't understand that a coach could even help me.
Right. Yeah. Right. And, they always say, you have to be ready. Right. And that's one of the just head bang into the wall, frustrations about working with leaders is that when someone's not ready to see it, or they're not ready to slow themselves down, there's only so much you can do when you're supporting those, those individuals and ourselves too, right? In terms of being able to see it. And, for me, even now, there's times where I come and go out of it. I'll be like, at the end of the day, I'm like, what the, I felt like I was in this tense, anxious state. And it wasn't until late in the day where I'm finally really starting to kind of go through it. Right. Because there's only so much time in the day. So sometimes we have to do the best by ourselves to say, okay, you know what? I am going to come back around though. And that's the thing that I think we so often struggle with, is that intention to come back around, to say, you know what? Something really kind of caught me there, but I got to get through X, Y, or Z. But I really want to make sure that I recognize that there's something going on, and to be able to kind of navigate in that way is new. This is not something that we kind of know naturally, but to be able to kind of have that sense, around recognizing that matters, I think can really make a huge difference. So, okay, let's get into the last question. How's that sound?
Okay. Love it.
All right. Any advice to the HR professional out there who struggles with reactivity and maybe feeling overwhelmed around how they can break the habit? Because again, habit, addiction, it all is connected. So,
yeah, I mean, I started this practice last summer, and it worked so well for me that I started using it as a tool when I was doing one-on-one coaching with my clients, and it works for them too. It's very simple. And at the end of every day, just doing an assessment like you talked about a couple of questions ago. It's what went well today, really shifting your brain to, okay, what am I celebrating? Like, there were things that went well today. What went well, what didn't? And not in that judgmental way, in that curious, but what didn't go so well today? And then the third part, what am I going to do differently tomorrow? And it's just these mini check-ins with ourselves. And I would ask myself these 3 questions every evening. I was committed to go on an evening walk. I quit drinking about a year ago. And instead of drinking after work, because I was doing a double shot margarita every night during COVID, something had to change. So I swapped out alcohol after work for evening walks. And I just would ask myself those questions. And for me, I love being in nature. I'm surrounded by wilderness where I live here in Marble, Colorado. It is what keeps me grounded. It's what informs my spirituality, just everything. And going out into nature and just asking myself those questions, just surrounded in this very grounding practice of walking in nature, really helps me see. When I first started doing the practice, I noticed that it was quote unquote time management that I was struggling with. Every single night after night, the thing what didn't go so well? Your time management. And what was beneath that for me, it just that how I've conditioned myself since I was 21 years old, starting in HR. You have to do everything and be everything all at once. And I just had to really take a look at that the summer before last and say, okay, you want to be a coach, you want to be a consultant, but you can't say yes to everyone. Yeah. You can't, because you're not doing your clients a full service if you're spread too thin. So that's sort of been my MO. And when I really started asking myself, okay, what can you do differently? I experimented with things like time blocking so that I could be more responsive to the important things versus reactive. And those little tools that worked for me. And they don't always work for my clients. So we come up with different tools that they want to experiment. And once we find the tool that works, that shifts them out of that reactive HR, game on. Life is different. We have made the shift into responsive HR. It's so freaking cool. I love it. I love what I get to do. I just do. So yeah, a little self-assessment, a little self-coaching for anybody who's not up for full-on coaching would be my advice for anyone struggling.
Yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I think, there's no one size fits all, right? Nope. There's no one way to really be able to kind of get to the heart of what is triggering us. And it's just so important to in recognizing that and really, taking that time to see how impactful it can be to start to explore what really is going on. So for me, the daily is so I love that so much. I actually have a little sticky on my computer that basically says after every significant emotional experience, do a download, so you and I go through your coaching through, I know what that is, right? So yes. That's my telltale, right? So if I've been triggered in some way, I do a download, and I basically what I was talking about a little bit earlier is go through and what's really going on here. What am I upset about? Okay, why? Start asking the why questions, right? They say the 5 why questions.
5 whys,
really start to get through. So it's very, very similar. And I try to do, the nightly check-in. I'm part of, I'm also not a drinker, as you know, and it's been several months now, and I'm part of a women's morning gratitude group where we go on every morning and We talk about, what we're grateful for the day. And, what I
Oh,
love so much about that is similar to what you're talking about. It's kind of like making this commitment to ourselves to really be seeking for, the beauty, all around, and really be recognizing the simple things, right? And when it comes to like checking in with ourselves and really kind of learning more about ourselves, what causes the ups and what causes the downs, being able to find that grounding within ourselves, and then being able to also just have that gratitude for so much that makes it all happen. Yeah, that for me is one of the biggest, is one, just really, like you said, really checking in with yourself as much as you can, because that I think is the key to enlightenment, is self-awareness. There's no doubt in my mind is the key for us truly being able to kind of come to, that level of neutrality. So we can truly be able to kind of have, just such cooperative, collaborative, and loving relationships with others, is through self-awareness. And so, yeah. And so, having that sense of gratitude as much as you can, once you do, kind of know how powerful that can be, I think that then helps just increase then my level of, my level of care for, for others and for the world around me, which then helps me, have more compassion and for myself. So it's like, I think it just really gets back to, you have to, recognize that there's no progress without, the commitment to put the practice in, and being able to recognize where that is for you. You said it so brilliantly, is to really recognize the individual ways that it's going to fuel your tank, right? To be able to kind of build that tank. And so recognizing that, through the these different ways, you can then be able to see how much more there is to give. And that can come from a place of calm, responsive, responsible awareness. So yeah, that's mine. I'm like, I feel like I should be meditating right now.
I feel like I just had a full body massage and quick meditation. That was very therapeutic. As you're speaking, I'm just like, yes, Jen, yes.
But it's so true. And it's like, you know what, it can sound hoity-toity and it can sound like in the clouds, but seriously, guys, it's really, truly, it comes down to this simple stuff. And yet, we just need to talk about it more, like we do, and normalize the stuff and just say, hey, you know what, like, you really want this for yourself. You understand like how much of an impact it can make. And so for like, you and I and others out there, it's just a matter of starting to kind of take those small little steps around, what can I do today? If it's at the end of the day, like you had said in your inventory or your check-in, what can I do tomorrow? And then do it. And then the next day you do it again and you say, what can I do tomorrow? And then you do that. And it's going to get to be a little uncomfortable, and it's going to be a little awkward the first time we get out there and start doing these different things, right? And we can talk about that in a whole nother episode, because that's then where the change takes place, is it's going to be wobbly and uncomfortable first, but you got to just do it.
Yeah.
So, oh, what an episode 30. Do you have any final parting thoughts before we wrap up?
I mean, I did some coaching this afternoon. We stopped in Meeker, Colorado. I have group coaching I do. It's part of HR Empower Hour every Thursday at noon Mountain Time. And one of my group coaching clients had just been at the beach for a week of vacation. She's like, I just want to experience that, that calm that you were just talking about. It's like that peace and that calm. And anytime I'm coaching clients who have been coaching for a while, they know what their root is. They know what they're after. And she and I have worked together. I mean, it's probably going on 6 months now in a group format. And she knows exactly what she wants. She wants that peace that she feels when she's on vacation.
Yeah.
So we talked about what she used to do for peace. She's like, I was super into yoga, all the things. And she's like, but that's just not, that's part of my past. I want something new. I want something different. So she was walking me through all the things that she is doing differently to not just leave peace for the weekends and for vacations, but how she's going to infuse that into her everyday life. And it's funny that you bring up body all the time, because one of the things she's doing is she's going to see a somatic practitioner to really, yes, I know, I knew you'd love that. And I was like, she asked, she's like, have you done somatic work? And I was like, no, tell me everything, right? I've never done somatic work. And she really inspired me. So this is another 30-year tenured HR professional who is saying, I love my vacations, but when I get back in it, it's fire everywhere. And I want that calm. So she is literally trying new things to achieve that calm. And that's exactly what we've been talking about today. So not only identifying the what, but the how, and putting those systems in place, right? And we meet every single week. So I'm like, I'm going to be asking you about this as your accountability partner next, right? So it's super fun. And I'm so, like you were saying, the 5 people we surround ourselves with, the people that we need to be asking, what areas do I need to improve? All of those things, it matters. It matters. What type of conversation are you having? Are you surrounding yourself with other people who are bitching and moaning and staying in reactive HR, like you were describing earlier in your career? Or are you surrounding yourself with HR practitioners who practice responsive HR? It's a practice. So surround yourself. I guess that would be my other advice. Surround yourself with people who actively practice responsive HR.
Yeah. And can own those failures in the process, right? Like, I think that's such a huge part of it is, as you're starting to practice something new, it's not going to always come out perfectly. And that's, I think, what then holds us back. Right. It's like, oh, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to put that out there again, because it's really be challenging as you start to kind of navigate through it. But it in order to really get to that other side, finding those networks, I think makes a huge it's hugely beneficial. And what you provide, the service you provide, is just amazing. So hopefully most of our listeners will continue to pay attention to that and jump on your group.
Well, but likewise, your Facebook community, you do a lot of that for women in HR, and it's remarkable what you've created and the support that you provide in helping people make those shifts too. So kudos to you. My hat is forever off to you in the community you've created through social. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap up this 30th episode on putting out fires and becoming more responsive than reactive. Katherine, thank you so much for another amazing episode.
Thank you, Jen. None of this is possible without Jen, listeners. You all have to realize that this was Jen's vision to do this podcast. So hat is off to Jen forever and always. Jen, thank you for everything.
Well, we have so much excitement kind of coming down the line, viewers and listeners, because we're in the process of changing our logo and really spicing and sprucing up Thrive and Shine HR in such an exciting way. So I hope if you have not downloaded, rated, reviewed, liked, loved this podcast, please do so. And, with that, we hope that every day is a